Letter 5. The Pope. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abraham by God Most High, and blessed be God Most High. Genesis 4:18-20. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. John 14:6. Henceforth let no man trouble me, for I bear on my body the marks of Jesus. Galatians 6:17. Dear unknown friend, the card, the Pope, puts us in the presence of the Act of Benediction. It is essential to have this in mind when one undertakes the interpretation not only of the structure of the whole card, but also of each of its particular elements. One should therefore never lose from sight that in the first place it is a matter of benediction, and everything associated with it, no matter who the Pope may be, or who the acolytes kneeling before him are, and no matter what the two columns behind the Pope signify, and no matter what his tiara and the triple cross he is holding symbolize. What is benediction? What is its source and its effect? Who has the authority to bestow benediction? What role does it play in the spiritual life of humanity? Now, benediction is more than a simple good wish made for others. It is also more than a magical impress of personal thought and will upon others. It is the putting into action of divine power transcending the individual thought and will of the one who is blessed, as well as the one who is pronouncing the blessing. In other words, it is an essentially sacerdotal act. The Kabbalah compares the role of prayer and benediction to a double movement, ascending and descending, similar to the circulation of the blood. The prayers of humanity rise towards God, and, after having been divinely oxidized, are transformed into benedictions which descend below from above. This is why one of the acolytes of the card has his left hand raised, and the other has his right hand lowered. The two blue columns behind the Pope symbolize in the first place this twofold current, rising and descending, of prayers and benedictions. At the same time, the Pope himself holds aloft a triple cross on the side with the column of prayer, and the praying acolyte, whilst his right hand on the side with the column of benediction and the acolyte receiving, or inspiring, benediction, makes the gesture of benediction. The two sides of the Kabbalah, the right side and the left side, and the two columns of the Sephiroth tree, the pillar of mercy and that of severity, and similarly the two pillars of the Temple of Solomon, Jachin and Boaz, correspond exactly to the two columns of prayer and benediction on this card. Because it is severity which stimulates prayer, and it is mercy which blesses. The venous blue blood of Boaz ascends, and the arterial oxidized red blood of Jachim descends. The red blood bears the vivifying benediction of oxygen. The blue blood rids the organism of the severity of carbonic acid. It is the same in the spiritual life. Spiritual asphyxia menaces he who does not practice some form of prayer. He who practices it receives vivifying benediction in some form. The two columns therefore have an essentially practical significance, as practical spiritually as respiration is for the life of the organism. Thus, the first practical teaching of the fifth arcanum, for the major arcana of the tarot are spiritual exercises, relates to spiritual respiration. There are two kinds of respiration: horizontal respiration, which takes place between outside and inside, and vertical respiration, which takes place between above and below. The sting of death, or the essential crisis of the supreme agony, is the abrupt passage from horizontal to vertical respiration. Yet he who has learnt vertical respiration whilst living will be spared from this sting of death. For him, the passage from the one form of respiration to the other will not be of the nature of a right angle, but rather the arc of a circle. The transition will not be abrupt and gradual, but curved instead of rectangular. Now, the essence of vertical respiration is the alternation between prayer and benediction or grace. These two elements of vertical respiration manifest themselves in all domains of the inner life: mind, heart, and will. Thus, a relevant problem for the mind, which is not due to curiosity or intellectual collectionism, but rather to the thirst for truth, is fundamentally a prayer. And the illumination by which it may be followed is the corresponding benediction or grace. True suffering also is fundamentally always a prayer. And the consolation, peace, and joy which can follow are the effects of the benediction or grace corresponding to it. True effort of the will, i.e. 100% effort, true work, is also a prayer. When it is intellectual work, it is prayer, hallowed be thy name. When it is creative work, it is prayer, thy kingdom come. When it is work with a view to supplying for the material needs of life, it is prayer, give us this our daily bread. And all these forms of prayer in the language of work have their corresponding benedictions or graces. The law of correspondence between the column of prayer, problems, suffering, effort, and that of benediction, illumination, consolation, fruits, is found expressed by the Master in the Beatitudes of the Sermon on the Mount. The 9, for there are 9 and not 8 Beatitudes, can thus be understood as the formula of vertical respiration. They teach it to us. This respiration is the state of soul that the Apostle Paul designated as freedom in God. It is a new way of breathing. One freely breathes the divine breath, which is freedom. The Lord is Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17. The spiritual counterpart to horizontal respiration is the alternation from extroversion to introversion, or from attention to the objective external life to the subjective inner life. The law of horizontal respiration is love your neighbour as yourself, Luke 10:27. Here is the equilibrium between these two directions of attention. With respect to vertical respiration, its law is love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, Matthew 22:37. Here is the relationship between prayer and benediction or grace. There are 3 levels of horizontal respiration, just as there are 3 stages of vertical respiration. The 3 levels of horizontal respiration are love of nature, love of one's neighbour, love of the beings of the spiritual hierarchies, angels, etc. The 3 stages of vertical respiration are purification by divine breath, illumination by divine light, mystical union in divine fire. This is why the Pope holds aloft the triple cross. The triple cross has 3 cross pieces which divide the vertical line into 3 parts. It is the cross of complete and perfect spiritual respiration, horizontal and vertical. It is the cross of triple love of neighbour, lower neighbour for nature, equal neighbour for man, higher neighbour for beings of the hierarchies, and triple love of God, breath or faith, light or hope, and fire or love. It is the sceptre of the Pope's authority for this card, just as the sphere formed from the double cup and topped by the cross is the sceptre of the Emperor. Just as the Emperor, guardian of the throne of David, represents towards heaven the human, i.e. the divine image and likeness in man, so does the Pope, guardian of the portal to the pillars of benediction and prayer, represent transcendental divinity towards mankind. The 2 posts, that of Emperor and that of Pope, are 2 spiritual realities. They are as real as the head and the heart are in the life of the individual. The heart is the centre of respiration and blood circulation. The head is the centre of the nervous system and is the seat of thought. And just as no parliament will replace the spiritual reality of the post of Emperor, the throne of David cannot be replaced by collectivity, so will no ecumenical council replace the spiritual reality of the post of Pope, or the throne of Melchizedek, King of Plenitude, Salem. Whether the cannon shot predicted in esoteric circles of the Occident be given or not, Whether the sacerdotal throne remains visible or whether it be installed in the catacombs, it will certainly remain present forever in the future history of humanity, despite what the prophets of its destruction may say. Because history, as moreover the life of the individual, is worked by day and by night. It has a diurnal aspect and a nocturnal aspect. The former is exoteric, while the latter is esoteric. The silence and obscurity of the night is always full of events in preparation, and all that which is unconscious or superconscious in the human being belongs to the domain of night. This is the magical side of history, the side of magical deeds and works acting behind the facade of history by day. Thus, when the gospel was preached by the light of day in the countries around the Mediterranean, the nocturnal rays of the gospel effected a profound transformation of Buddhism. There, the ideal of individual liberation by entering the state of nirvana gave way to the ideal of renouncing nirvana for the work of mercy towards suffering humanity. The ideal of Mahayana, the great chariot, then had its resplendent ascent to the heaven of Asia's moral values. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge. Psalms 19:1. This is the formula of the twofold teaching, by the speech of day and by the knowledge of night, of the twofold tradition, by verbal teaching and by direct inspiration, of twofold magic, by the spoken word and by silent radiation, and lastly of twofold history, visible history by day and invisible history by night. Now, the posts of emperor and pope are realities beyond as well as on this side of the threshold which separates day and night, and the pope of the fifth card is the guardian of this threshold. He is seated between the two pillars, the pillar of day or prayer and the pillar of night or benediction. The emperor of the fourth card is the master of the day and the guardian of the blood or quintessence of the nocturnal reality of the day. The Pope is the guardian of respiration, or of the reality of the relationship between day and night. That which he guards is the equilibrium between day and night, between human effort and divine grace. His post is founded on primordial cosmic deeds. Thus the first book of Moses says, "And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night." Genesis 1:4-5. And the act of separation of the intelligible from the mysterious signifies at the same time the establishing of cosmic respiration, which is the analogy of the Spirit of God moving above the face of the waters. For the divine breath above the profoundness of peace, the waters, it is this which is the psychological as well as the cosmic reality of nirvana, is the divine prototype of respiration. Therefore, the great chariot, the Mahayana of Buddhism, raises itself towards the divine breath, the mercy which moves above the waters of the pre-cosmic peace of nirvana, whilst the little chariot, the Hinayana, aspires towards the end of respiration. Its aim is to be drowned in the waters of peace, to enter into nirvana where there is no movement, neither change nor respiration. But the divine breath, or Ruach Elohim, is above the ocean of peace of nirvana. The divine breath moves it. And to renounce nirvana, after having arrived at its threshold, means to say, rise above nirvana and participate in the divine breath transcending it. Now, primordial water penetrated by divine breath is the essence of blood. Breath reflected by the water is light. The rhythmic alternation from absorption of the breath by water to its reflection by it is respiration. Light is the day, blood is the night, and respiration is plenitude or Salem. Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, is therefore appointed to plenitude, to respiration, whilst the anointed king, guardian of the throne of David or the emperor, is appointed to the day. Although he is appointed to the day, he is anointed by the night, and he owes his authority to the night, whose mysterious presence during the day, the blood he guards. Dear unknown friend, you will probably ask yourself if there is a third post, a post for he who is appointed to the night. Yes, the post of Master of the Night, he is also named Lord of the Night, exists. We shall approach the various ideas relating to this post in the 9th letter dedicated to the 9th arcanum of the tarot. It suffices to indicate here that in Israel there were 3 higher posts, the posts of king, high priest, and prophet. This is also the place to remark that it is a matter of posts and not of persons. A single person can occupy 2 or even 3 posts. But let us return to the post of the Pope, which is the subject of the 5th arcanum of the tarot. It relates to spiritual respiration, as we have seen. This is why the Pope represents another category of truth and another criterion of truth than the scientific truth and criterion. For him, true is that which comprises harmonious respiration. False is that which upsets the harmony of spiritual respiration. Thus, the heliocentric system of modern astronomical science is true from the point of view of the science of phenomena, but it is at the same time fundamentally false from the viewpoint of spiritual respiration. The blood that issued from Christ onto the earth is precious to such a degree that he gave the earth the central position in the space of noumenal values. The geocentric cosmos is therefore true from the point of view of respiration, i.e. from the point of view of the life of prayer and benediction. And the heliocentric cosmos, although it has the support of all the facts of the phenomenal world, is false because it fails to recognize that which is truly central, the incarnation of the Word, and replaces it by a centre situated more at the periphery, removed from the central value. The sun is only a centre in phenomenal place, and one commits the sin of idolatry in attributing to it the central role which belongs to the sanctified earth, sanctified and thus rendered central by the incarnation of the Word. Here is another example, this time from the domain of esoteric experience. As we have already mentioned, reincarnation, successive lives of the same human individuality, is a fact of experience, as are the successive periods of wakefulness belonging to the day, which are interrupted by sleep at night. Buddha recognized the fact of reincarnation as such, but he considered it regrettable. This is why the aim of the Eightfold Path which he taught is to put an end to reincarnation, because nirvana is the end of successive terrestrial lives. Thus Buddha recognized and at the same time denied the fact of reincarnation. He recognized it as fact, and he denied it as ideal. Because facts are transitory, they come and go. There was a time when there was no reincarnation. There will be a time when it will no longer be. Reincarnation commenced only after the fall, and it will cease with reintegration. It is therefore not eternal, and therefore it is not an ideal. There are therefore 2 truths. The one is actual or temporal, and the other ideal or eternal. The first is founded on the logic of facts, the other on moral logic. Now, Psalm 85 designates actual truth, emeth, by the word truth, veritas, and truth based on moral logic, chesed, by the word mercy, misericordia. The Psalm says, mercy, or chesed, and truth, emeth, will meet. Justice, or tzedek, and peace, or shalom, will embrace each other. Truth, or emeth, will spring up from the ground, or miretz, and justice, or tzedek, will look down from the heavens, or mishamem. Psalm 85, 10-11. Here is the problem of double truth in its entirety, and here is the moving prophecy that the 2 truths, the factual and the moral, will at some time meet, and that their revelation in man, justice, or zedek, and peace, or shalom, will embrace each other. But they will meet only slowly, and, given the actual state of affairs, they often still contradict one another, at least in appearance. This is why St. Paul had to say that the wisdom of this world is folly with God. 1 Corinthians 3:19. And this is why also divine wisdom is often folly before this world. Now, the Pope, being the guardian of spiritual respiration, and the letter He, the 5th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, has breath as its primitive hieroglyph, is the representative of moral logic. Benediction and prayer are the two pillars between which he is seated. It is only that which is ideal which is true for him. Here is why for him marriage is indissoluble. Although there may be thousands of matrimonial catastrophes, here is why confession and repentance efface every sin. Though thousands of tribunals only punish the guilty, whether they repent or not, here is why the Church is guided by the Holy Spirit. Though it practiced or tolerated the practice of the Inquisition for centuries, and here is why a single life on earth suffices for eternal salvation, although souls reincarnate. Thus, the Pope is always at the middle of a conflict between ideal truth and actual truth, between mercy, chesed, and truth, or emeth. And this conflict is a wound, namely the fifth wound, the wound of the heart. For if the Emperor has 4 wounds, the Pope has 5. If you are acquainted, dear unknown friend, with the symbolism of the Kabbalah, you know that the wound spoken of here is due to the opposition between the 4th Sephirah, Chesed, or mercy, and the 5th Sephirah, Geburah, or severity, on the tree of the Sephiroth, and that this wound refers to the 6th Sephirah, Tifereth, or beauty or harmony, which is the synthesis of the 2 preceding Sephiroth. If, moreover, you occupy yourself with Christian esotericism, you will comprehend that the wound in question is that of the Sacred Heart, caused externally by one of the soldiers who pierced his side with a spear, and at once there came out blood and water. John 19:34. And you will understand also that it is mercy and truth, or chesed and emeth, that came out as blood and water. This is why the evangelist emphasizes the symbolic reality or the real symbolism of the fact that the blood and water that came out of the wound were not mixed, and that it is in this fact that the spiritual sense of the wound is found expressed. The wound is caused spiritually by the conflict between mercy and truth, between ideal truth and actual truth, which are not united. And the evangelist goes on to say, "He who saw it has borne witness, his testimony is true, and he knows that he tells the truth, that you also may believe." John 19:35. He has therefore seen the fact, and he knows what he wants to say as a symbol of the spiritual reality of the wound. But now we are in the realm of the esotericism of the 5 wounds, the flaming star, the pentagram, the quinternary, or the number 5. Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin says that, as long as numbers are united and bound up with the decad, there is not one that presents the image of corruption or deformity. It is only when one separates them that these characteristics manifest themselves. Amongst the numbers thus specified, some are absolutely evil, such as 2 and 5. These are also the only ones which divide the number 10. Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin, De Nombre 21. According to Saint-Martin, the quinternary, with respect to the binary, we refer you to letter 2, where you may find a discussion of the statement of Saint-Martin concerning the evil nature of the number 2, is therefore absolutely evil when it is not united and bound up with the decad. Thus he says, "The forms of animals must also be such as to serve as receptacles for the torments of the quinternaries, torments that we ourselves exert against them in imitation of these same quinternaries." Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin, De Nombre 31. Eliphas Levi says, however, that the pentagram signifies the domination of the mind over the 4 elements, and the demons of air, the spirits of fire, the phantoms of water, and ghosts of earth are enchained by this sign. Equipped therewith and suitably disposed, you may behold the infinite through the medium of that faculty which is like the soul's eye, and you will be ministered unto by legions of angels and hosts of fiends. Page 63. Then, the empire of will over the astral light, which is the physical soul of the 4 elements, is represented in magic by the pentagram placed at the head of this chapter. Page 67. And further still, on 24th July in the year 1854, the author of this book, Eliphas Levi, made an experiment of evocation with the pentagram after due preparation according to the ceremonies indicated in the 13th chapter of the ritual, page 69. And lastly, We must remark, however, that the use of the pentagram is most dangerous for operators who are not in possession of its complete and perfect understanding. The direction of the points of the star is in no sense arbitrary, and may change the entire character of an operation, as we shall explain in the ritual. Page 69. Eliphas Levi, Dogma et Rituel de la Haute Magie. In Chapter 5 of Transcendental Magic, its Doctrine and Ritual, we find the following summary of Eliphas Levi's doctrine concerning the pentagram. The pentagram, which in Gnostic schools is called the blazing star, is the sign of intellectual omnipotence and autocracy. But in the Key of the Mysteries, Eliphas Levi says, the quinary or quinternary is the number of religion, for it is the number of God united to that of woman. Eliphas Levi, The Key of the Mysteries, page 30. And much later still, in his posthumous work, Le Grand Arcane or l'Occultisme dévoilé, the Great Arcanum or Occultism Unveiled, Eliphas Levi writes, the ancient rites have lost their effectiveness since Christianity appeared in the world. The Christian and Catholic religion, in fact, is the legitimate daughter of Jesus, King of the Mages. A simple scapular worn by a truly Christian person is a more invincible talisman than the ring and pentacle of Solomon. The Mass is the most prodigious of evocations. Necromancers evoke the dead, the sorcerer evokes the devil and he shakes, but the Catholic priest does not tremble in evoking the living God. Catholics alone have priests because they alone have the altar and the offering, i.e. the whole of religion. To practice high magic is to compete with the Catholic priesthood. It is to be a dissident priest. Rome is the great Thebes of the new initiation. It has crypts for its catacombs, for a talisman its rosaries and medallions, for a magic chain its congregations, for magnetic fires its convents, for centres of attraction its confessionals, for means of expansion its pulpits and the addresses of its bishops. It has, lastly, its Pope, the man-God rendered visible. Eliphas Levi, Le Grand Arcane or l'Occultisme dévoilé, pages 67 to 68 and 83 to 84. And we conclude by citing Josephine Pelledin, who declared himself in agreement with the preceding. The Eucharist is the whole of Christianity, and through it Christianity has become living magic. Since Jesus, there are still sorcerers, but there are no more mages. Josephine Pelledin, L'Occulte Catholique, page 312. Well, after all these quotations, where are we now? We have arrived at a very serious problem, that of the pentagram or evil quinternary and the pentagram or good quinternary. Because according to San Martin, whose clear presentation of the problem lends itself better than any other in serving as a point of departure, the quinternary is good as long as it is united and bound to the decad, and it is absolutely evil when it is separated and isolated from it. In other words, the pentagram as the sign of intellectual autocracy, i.e. the emancipated human personality, is good when it is the expression of the personality whose will is united and bound to the fullness of the manifestation of unity, the decad, and it is evil when it expresses the will of the personality separated from this unity. Or, in other words again, the sign is good when it expresses the formula fiat voluntas tua, thy will be done, and it is evil when the formula of the underlying will is fiat voluntas mea, my will be done. Here is the moral and practical meaning of San Martin's statement. With regard to the statements of Eliphas Levi and Josephine Pelledin that we have quoted, they add their conviction that it is the universal or Catholic Church which represents for humanity the decad or fullness of manifested unity. For them, the will united and bound to the essence of the Church is expressed by the good pentagram, understood in the sense of San Martin, and the will that is purely and simply personal is expressed by the evil pentagram. This is why Madame Blavatsky accused Eliphas Levi of Jesuit politics, and why Josephine Pelledin's old occultist friends regretted his relapse into Roman sectarianism. But now, it is not a question of taking sides in the War of the Two Roses, nor of accusing or regretting. Here it is a matter of the problem of personal arbitrary magic, the quinternary separated from the decad, and personal sacred magic, the quaternary, united and bound to the decad. And this is the thesis that I put forward with regard to this problem, a thesis which is the fruit of 43 years of experience in the esoteric domain. It is only the pentagram of the 5 wounds which is the effective sign of personal sacred magic, whilst the pentagram of the 5 currents of personal will, no matter how the points of this pentagram are turned, is the effective sign for the imposition of the personal will of the operator on beings weaker than him. It is always a fundamentally tyrannic act. This is the thesis. Let us now proceed to its explanation. A magical act presupposes an effect surpassing the normal power of the operator. This surplus of power may be furnished by forces which are obedient to the operator, or by forces borrowed by him, or lastly by forces acting through the operator and which he obeys. In the case of forces which are supplied to the operator by submission, it is a matter of the operation of magic that we have designated in letter 3 as personal or arbitrary, i.e. an operation whose source of initiative, whose means and aim are found exclusively in the will and understanding of the personality of the operator. Such an operation can only make use of forces lower than the operator, for one does not command angels. The operator here is alone and acts as a magical technician under his own responsibility and at his own risk and peril. One could also designate this type of magic as Faustian. In the case of forces borrowed by the operator, it is a matter of an act of collective magic. It is the magic chain which renders the operator more powerful. It lends him the forces which he then makes use of for the operation. In this case, the operator is aided by forces which are equal to him and not lower than him, as in the case of Faustian magic. The power and the effect depend here on the number of people belonging to the chain. One could designate this type of magic as collective. Lastly, in the case of forces acting through the operator as intermediary and which he obeys, it is also a matter of a chain, but a vertical and qualitative or hierarchical chain, instead of a horizontal and quantitative chain, which latter is the case with collective magic. The operator here is alone in the horizontal sense, but he is not in the vertical sense. Above him, beings higher than him act with him and through him. This type of magic presupposes the fact of being in conscious relationship with higher spiritual beings, i.e. it assumes prior mystical and Gnostic experience. We have designated this type of magic in letter 3 as sacred magic, because the forces active in operations of this magic are superior to the operator. However, its historical name is theurgy. The formulae expressing the fundamental attitude of the personal will corresponding to the 3 types of magic described above are fiat voluntas mea, or Faustian magic, fiat voluntas nostra, or collective magic, and fiat voluntas tua, or sacred magic. The first 2 forms of magic, Faustian and collective, make use of the method of which the pentagram of the 5 currents of personal and collective will is the sign. They are based on the principle that the strong dominates the weak. It is a matter here of the power of compulsion. With respect to the 3rd form of magic, sacred magic, the method it makes use of is not the force of the will, but rather its purity. But as the will as such is never entirely pure, for it is not the flesh which bears the stigmata of original sin, nor thought as such, but rather the will, it is necessary that the 5 dark currents inherent in the human will, i.e. the desire to be great, to take, to keep, to advance and to hold on to at the expense of others, are paralyzed or nailed. The 5 wounds are therefore the 5 vacuities which result in the 5 currents of the will, and these vacuities are filled by will from above, i.e. by absolutely pure will. This is the principle of magic, of the pentagram of 5 wounds.